Hey everybody, welcome to In the Record Room. I'm Barney Taylor, and today I'm joined by DJ, promoter and collector Paul Mulholland. Paul, thanks ever so much for joining me this afternoon. How are you?
Brilliant, and thank you, Barney, so much for asking me to do this. It's indeed a great privilege to be asked.
It's my privilege. As you know by now, this show is as much about me being nosy and asking people to tell me stories about their childhood as it is about the collecting of vinyl and all of those kind of things. Now, you know how this is going to work. I have set you the painful task of choosing 3 records that have a resonance or a story, and I'm going to ask you to hold them up because I think there's no substitute for actually holding them. I wish we had some kind of smell-o-vision where you could smell them as well, because there's something lovely about old objects. But before we do that, what I'd really like you to do, Paul, is just tell me how you got started. Tell me what soul music means to you, and because I know that you've been very, 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 very heavily involved in the soul scene. So perhaps you might just give me a sense of where it all started.
Well, like so many others in Ireland at that time of, we'll say, the early 80s, I got into the mod scene. I would have been quite young compared to a lot of the people around at the time, so I would have been 12, 13 when I took a particularly strong interest in the whole style and music side of it in particular.
Yeah.
And I became very fascinated by the whole scene. I bought that Richard Barnes book, and I remember going through it going, wow, because up to that point I just thought it was top 20 material, like the Two-Tone and Mod Revival and that. But when I bought Richard Barnes' book, it was like opening Pandora's box, and you're going, wow, there's so much to this. Yeah. And there's a part in it, I don't know if you remember, but it's a double page of American black R&B, Motown and soul artists. And I just scout around all of these little pictures and then keep turning the page back and over to see who they were. Yeah. And there was the Soul Sisters and James Brown and Marvin Gaye, Martha Reeves. And at the same time, I was a friend of mine who was a real techie head, and he was big into electronic music. He used to digest the NME, and he collected vinyl and cassettes and albums. But he seemed to know everything about music. And I picked up this LP in the local record store. It was 20 Mod Classics on Tamla Motown.
Oh, very good.
And I said, this doesn't really make sense to me. He says, what? I said, well, it's Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross. And he says, oh yeah, the Mods were into that in the 60s. I said, they were? Oh yeah. He said, it's great music to dance to, he said. Yeah. So I was intrigued with this. What I also remember about that LP was it was £7, which is quite dear at the time.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of money.
This is 1982, 83.
Yeah.
So when I came to my birthday, I'd say, right, I'll get that, just out of pure curiosity.
Yeah.
And I went home, I played it, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I thought, well, brilliant, because I'd been into two-tone and I'd been into electronic music, and I'd been into various. They were passing fads. Yeah. Almost a lot of as it would appear to a 12 or 13-year-old at the time. This I knew I stumbled across something really serious when I got into that music, and it's been that way ever up to today, really, for me, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I mean, so many people started with the kind of the two-tone and then some of that mod stuff. But as I was talking to Joe Moran about this, there's only so far you can go with a lot of that stuff. I mean, a lot of people are still fans of Paul Weller and have followed him up through, but it's a lot of that other, the sort of the more moddy stuff, the kind of the jam rip-off stuff, I never really enjoyed. I always just found it limited or uninteresting. Now, I know that's probably quite controversial, but I think the way it became a gateway to discover soul music effectively. Yes. I think that's the most important aspect of this story. So you got that album, you got it for your birthday in the end, did you?
Yeah, I was 14 when I got it. So I could nearly say at the time I turned 14, I was introduced to soul music.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's what it is, because it takes one thing, I suppose, to trigger it, and then we move in and out of these things. I mean, a lot of my friends, we all got into house and kind of wandered away from the sort of the Kent stuff that we had been listening to, but you can always come back. I mean, and this has been my experience. I came back to a lot of this stuff 4 or 5 years ago, and it's as if I've never been away. I don't know whether there's a similar sense with yourself where you still feel the same way as you did when you first discovered it? Are you still discovering new music and looking for bits and pieces?
Oh, of course. You know, it's an endless task, really, when you stumble upon the scene, the music, and all that comes with it. For me, anyway, I've always had that hunger to discover something new.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, it doesn't just stop with Northern Soul, but it went into soulful house and jazz funk and all other aspects of the music again that kind of splinter away from Northern Soul too. Yeah. Some of it, you know. To me, it's all encompassing. To other people, it ain't. But I like to see the broader spectrum of soul music for what it is.
I think you have to, and that's not because there's any disrespect towards people that just want the standard stuff. That's absolutely fine, but there's such a vast landscape to explore that I think anybody, it's almost a shame if you don't take the time to explore, because you're going to discover so much and you'll move through, and then a record will take you somewhere, a producer, a label, whatever it is. What do you look for if you're looking for something new? What makes it for you? Is it a bass line? Is it
it's
brass?
Nothing really in particular. I think it's the hook. Does this record grab you? Does it hold your interest?
Yeah.
The minute you play it, there's certain records I've stumbled across and I go, I've a picture, I can see the dance floor full.
Yeah.
This record, as far as a DJ is concerned, this will see your horses home. And it has happened. And you put it on, you see the floor full and you go, well, what did I trust in my own intuition that way? Do you know what I mean?
That's the hardest thing, though, isn't it? Because you know, and I've been talking about this with other people, you can wait ages for a record, you can really want it, it's hard to get, you get it, and then there's not the right moment to play it, or the moment to play it passes. And because you're watching the dance floor so closely, you then might think, well, no, actually, and then that's gone, and then can you get it back? So it's a very curious relationship because you're in complete control of other people's movements in many ways. Do you find that, is there a pressure in that?
Oh yeah, and I think about getting it right is about as much as getting it wrong. We all, well, I certainly have. I've played clangers, or not even clangers, played great records, but at the wrong time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the key to it, isn't it? Because, I mean, and even if you spend the evening before the set you're going to play planning, or at least sorting your box out, it can all go wrong in a second. And then...
I watch a lot of the other DJs on YouTube just out of curiosity, and I tune into some of the Los Angeles hip hop DJs.
Yeah,
and they say exactly that. You need to have the background and the tunes there because, like you say, you can work it out in your head and go out on that night, and your audience isn't what you expected. Or they might be. You know, I've seen it happen with certain tunes that always work, and then sometimes just don't.
And that's that moment at which you see the dance floor empty, and then the pressure is then to get people on in the next minute or so.
On side,
Yeah, because, I mean, you have to kind of have the courage of your convictions as well, I guess, and you have to be prepared to think. It's about your audience as well. I mean, you've played everywhere, I guess, and so you would have a very interesting understanding of how different places will look for different records, or different crowds, even though they're part of the same scene, will be looking for a record which they know you've got, or you know they want to hear. I mean, maybe that's a segue into the record you've chosen. So, Paul, maybe we might talk about the first record you've chosen. And as I said before, I know this was hard to do, so I appreciate you taking the time.
I've given it a lot of thought over the last 24 hours, and I changed my mind about 20 times, and I'll probably look back and go, why did I pick that? I know. but like that, you know, that's the way it goes. But yeah, certain records, these would be ultra rare, but they are expensive or whatever, but they have a certain resonance and memory attached to it.
Perfect.
And when I hear it, it just takes me back to that place and time, so to speak. You know, and great times have been young and with your friends, and where we were at that time. And the first one here would be Eddie Holman, I Surrender.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
It's just, you know, it's a guaranteed floor filler. I mean, it's one of those, I call them get out of prison tunes. When it all goes wrong, you bang this one on, they're back inside again.
So when did you first hear it? What made you choose this record? What does it mean to you?
It brings me back to that place and time, mid-80s, scooter rallies in Ireland from where I came from, and the gang I hung around with.
Yeah.
And the Be Young, Be Foolish, Be Happy soundtrack.
Yeah.
We were just so free spirited.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful time, really, in hindsight. You know, I'll never forget it. I don't know why, but I mean, I did plenty of other things after that.
Of course.
There are those times in your life where just defining moments, even though you may not have seen it for what it was at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I'm interested.
My mate Dave, sorry.
No,
yeah,
all I was going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm very interested in the Irish scooter scene because obviously I grew up in Hastings, which was on the scooter run circuit in the UK, and my brother went to Fort William and all of the Isle of Wight, did all of that kind of stuff. Were there lots of destinations in Ireland? And then second question, did groups of you go to scooter runs or go on scooter runs in the UK? Did you?
Well, first, no, I never went to rallies in the UK.
Right.
But what I would say for us, I come from Galway in the west of Ireland.
Yeah.
It was like the mod scene up to, we'll say, about 83 seemed to be more about gangs of kids at school and hanging around amusement arcades and going out to promenade and that. It was very local. Yeah. But by the mid 80s, that had all faded away. And for us, we bought scooters. It took us out of our towns and into other parts of the country. We met like-minded souls. And Northern Soul, that's where I really got opened up into this world. I remember first run I ever went to, I was 15. And I told my parents I was staying in my friend's house.
And where was the run? Where did you go?
It was down in the west of Clare. It was Milltown, Malbay of all places. It was a funny story, that one. And God rest him, there was a lad called Rob Lynch, who died tragically a few years later. And he said to me, do you know any of those records? And he handed me a listing. And I went down through it. And of course I was mortified because I didn't know one tune in it. The only one I knew was Tainted Love, and it was Gloria Jones. I said, I know that one. And that was it. Yeah. But straight away I knew I'd stumbled into another minefield of stuff I just, like 3 years previously, I just hadn't a clue what this was or where it came from. But I was intrigued by the mystery around Northern Soul, about the self-discovery and the discovery of records that was all encompassed within it. Yeah. And there was a culture of cassettes back then. I don't know if it was the same in the UK, but we just seemed to know loads of people with loads of cassettes, firing them around, and you went home with about 3 or 4 of them in your pocket at the end of the weekend. That would be a separate history. You could do an entire series on the history of mixes that people used to make for each other on cassettes and how that opened up people to vinyl. I mean, we haven't got time to do the story of the cassettes, but you're absolutely right. You forget the importance of a TDK 90 or whatever they used to be. Yes, and the most amazing stuff I was introduced to via cassette from friends of mine. They may not have had the records themselves, but you were hearing Don Gardner, Cheating Kind, and you were hearing this stuff. Yeah. Back in Saul too. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, I might be at an all-nighter 20 years later, and they'd be kind of go, "How do you know about this stuff?" But that was the reason. It was like the secret society of passing on information. I think so. Absolutely, handing each other this artifact and say, "Oh, you've got to listen to this," because as you say, I mean, you wouldn't always have the singles, or you wouldn't, or your record players wouldn't be very good. My family had one of those big things that had a cassette deck in it as well and a glass fronted door, and it had some kind of turntable on the top. And actually it was probably safer to play cassettes than it was to play stuff on the battered turntable, even if you had the singles. And I only had a few two-tone singles and then a couple of Kent LPs and stuff like that. But it was so going back to the single you've chosen. So when was the last time? Do you play it out? Do you not play it? I've played it several times. I do, yeah. And it still creates the same reaction it did back then in the mid-80s. It just fills the floor. People love it. It's got the hook. It's a brilliantly composed tune. And the vocal is outstanding. I actually thought it was a duet when I first heard it, because he goes from a very high vocal back into the way he naturally sings. So he's going from that to falsetto and back in again. It actually sounds like a duet, but it's a greatly produced tune, and it has all the qualities of a good sounding pop tune in matter of speaking. So should I say pop? It's dance, isn't it? It's just music in some ways, I suppose. But I mean, all of this is dance music if you want to see it that way, because it does make you dance. And as you say, it's one of your get out of jail
records. But I think it's very interesting because a lot of these lines blur anyway, and something which might have been seen as one thing in 2020 is now, I mean, this is a question I'm asking a lot of people. Do you see classifications even within soul music? Do you see they matter less now than they used to? Things used to be much more sectioned into.
And boxed off. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I actually think it's a good thing to look outside of that.
Yeah.
Because if for me, and it's through reading articles and reading interviews with other DJs, particularly the pioneers of subcultures and scenes and all of that, I found a lot of them were very open-minded about what they listened to.
Yeah.
And that's how they came across this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, the MVPs were a rock group. You know, how did these DJs discover these tunes if they were just looking in one area?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. And it goes across all music spectrums, really. Yeah,
it does. It does. I think it can be controversial, but I mean, I think one of the things we've always tried to do with D8 is just be as broad as possible. I mean, we've had some amazing sets. We've had full gospel sets. We've had oldies, if you want to go. And there's me saying about classifications, and I'm now classifying. But I think it's about... It's natural curiosity, but it's about, as you say, being open to new ideas, because otherwise we would still only be listening to the three things that we started listening to. And some records are of their time anyway. A lot of people are describing how they heard some records in the 80s, but you might not hear them so much anymore. I mean, a lot of people would have been introduced to things like Frankie Valli or whatever it is, but I don't think you'd hear those as much now, because are they too familiar now? It's an interesting question, I think.
I think for a lot of DJs that would be the reason. And I suppose with anything, you're going to grow tired of it eventually, you know, if it's played time and time again. And there's so much of this stuff out there.
Yeah.
And there's so much great stuff that we like to make room for other stuff.
Yeah.
So, and it's a bit like your top 20, eventually it'll just ease its way out of being played or whatever. Or with radio DJs, you know. And that's the way life goes, I think, you know.
I think so. It's like choosing the three records. If we did this tomorrow, you might have chosen another three. I
most certainly would.
See, I fully understand the contingent nature of this arbitrary decision. Go back through a lifetime's collection and just pick out three things. I know how difficult that is. But maybe you might tell me what was the second record you've chosen then, Paul?
This one, the Paramount 4. You don't know.
Okay, lovely. Lovely. What does this mean to you?
Well, it's a funny one, really, because I got it off a friend of mine for nothing. We were going to a soul weekender in Great Yarmouth in 1991. Myself, that man's name is David O'Connell.
Right.
He lives in the UK now, but he was living in Galway at the time, and we both went over to the soul weekender in Great Yarmouth in 1991.
Yep.
He had a good few. He was a great man for getting records and passing them around and selling them to people. And to this day, he's a great comprehension for soul music, what it is, the feeling, the music, and like that, very open-minded to what he listens to. Yeah. Anyway, he brought this record over for Eddie Crosdale, I think, at the time. And he said, I don't know what this is. Eddie said, no, you're okay. And he said he was going off to Australia after that weekend, David was.
Right.
And he says to me, I'm going to Australia, here, you have it. So I said, thank you very much. I think it was worth about £15 at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I held on to it. I played it a few years later, cleared the dance floor. So I put it aside, never played it since. And then I was out and some DJs playing it, everybody's dancing to it again. And I said, I have that at home. Nobody ever danced to it when I played it. and then it's packing floors again. And I said, well, how much is it going for now? I said, 450 quid. I said, what? This is what happens. Do you know what I mean? So it's funny how certain records may not have their time then.
Yeah.
Down the line.
Yeah.
They get their moment on the decks.
They do, and I think that's part of the beauty of collecting, because you know that even if you put something to one side, you can come back to it. You'll be able to, or you might forget all about it, and then, as you say, you hear it out being played by someone. You go, well, I've got that, and then it comes back into your box, and then you wonder, will I play it? And then, when was the last time you played it? Can you remember?
I think I played it at the Soul All Nighter in Dublin in February.
Oh, right, okay.
City one.
Yes.
Actually, I'm really sure I did.
Did you fill the floor or empty it?
Well, the last few times I played it, it's gone down a bomb.
Yeah.
Which is great, you know.
Yeah.
It's the way it goes. the thing is to trust in your own intuition a bit better than I do at times, no. And believing in the music too.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you've played for years, so there's an innate amount of experience that you have where you don't just throw your records into the box and walk off if the first one doesn't work. You can work around those situations live, and as you say, you can put on your get out of jail card. But some records are always enduring, others go in and out, and then that's the pleasure of having them. Because you know that nobody's heard a certain record for a long time, and then you play it, and if it catches and people like it, then there's a real pleasure in that. I think this is the other question I wanted to ask you. It sounds like you get so much pleasure, not only out of holding these things and owning these things and telling the stories, but actually playing these things out. I mean, perhaps you might just say a little bit about what playing music live feels like for you. The pleasure of doing a DJ set.
Well, it's for me, it's the one scene where you can get as much enjoyment out on the floor as you can behind the decks. Yeah. And for me, it's the communal part of the experience at soul events that really resonates with me. And I sometimes, it's one thing listening to them at home, but hearing them over that big sound system.
Yeah.
With that timber dance floor in front of the decks.
Yeah.
And seeing people out on the floor and they're putting their hands in the air and clutching their chest, you're onto something here. Do you know what I mean? It's a spiritual feeling at the best of times, and it's very rewarding too.
It is. I mean, it's that collective rush, isn't it? At certain moments where, I used to see it when we'd go to all-nighters. Hastings Pier had all of the big kind of house things as well. So you'd be there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then suddenly something would bring everybody back up. Now, I'm not capable of staying up to 5 o'clock in the morning anymore, but there is a collective rush that you get from it's a symbiotic relationship between the DJ and the crowd and the music and the memories and the history of things. When was the first time you DJ'd? Can you remember the first set you ever played, or how did you start playing?
It was quite embarrassing, really. I was just gone 16, and there was an event that was held throughout Ireland known as the Pan Irish Mod Rally.
Okay.
And I was my friend. We were just playing LPs, and in hindsight, it was dreadful. The end of the last track was running out as we were going into the next track, and there was no. I don't even think we had headphones or whatever.
Yeah.
I got behind the decks, and my friend said, "Do you want to play a few?" So I did, and I can't even remember what I was playing. But that was the first time I stood. It was actually a great venue. It was a Corinthians rugby club in Galway.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that venue, and I remember just doing it and going, this is actually quite easy, but quite nerve-wracking at the same time.
Yeah.
Different when you have a responsive audience out there in front of you.
Yeah.
And you've got the choice of doing a good job or making yourself a nervous wreck, really,
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly, do you still feel nervous when you DJ? It's a question I ask a lot of people, because it's, there's the half hour before you go on where if you're like me, you're thinking, I've packed all the wrong records, I left all the good ones at home, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then suddenly, you start queuing up your first record because the other one is fading, and then it's too late. I mean, what's that moment like for you?
Worst, the worst was when you have your great tunes there, and there's about 4 DJs on before you, and they've played 3/4 of your box.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? And it's and then you wish your box was 4 times as big, and then you think, but I can't carry 5,000 records with me just for a half-hour set. But it's interesting because when you think about it, you're very vulnerable. You're incredibly vulnerable, especially in very small venues where people are very close to each other. Everyone's looking at you for the next half hour to keep them entertained. And that's really, 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 really nerve-wracking. Oh, it can be.
Yeah. And there's a big difference between your modern day DJ, with a lot of them, and your traditional soul DJ playing original, authentic 45s from America.
Yeah.
Whereas the modern DJ, he can be, and a lot of house DJs do it or whatever. They have a USB key.
Yeah.
We'll say with 20,000 tunes on it. I don't know how many you can. He doesn't have to worry about packing the wrong tunes.
No.
Or lugging them around. Whereas when you've got 100 records at the most in your little box.
Yeah.
You need to really believe in those records and that they're going to deliver on the night.
Yeah.
So as you say, it can be quite nerve-wracking when you do have 5 or 6 good big tunes that you're very proud of and can't wait to play, and somebody might play 3 or 4 of them already.
Yeah,
I'm running out of road here, you know.
That's interesting. I mean, it's a hard question to ask, but can you think of any sets or any places or any events you've played that have been real highlights for you across the years of DJing? Because, I mean, you've been DJing for a long time.
I have, yeah, but I to be honest with you, I find it hard to pinpoint the really good ones. I think over the term of time, you know, they kind of all merge in and out really of events, because we've had more or less, we've had a lot of people come and go, but there's been a hardcore of staunch soul fans in this country that have been there all the way through, and you know, we've stood by each other as well, and we've kept the wheels of this thing turning, which is great, like, you know, and come out to where we are today with it, you know.
I think that's one of the things that I'm beginning to find the most interesting from having conversations with yourself and other people. It's the constancy. It's the, you know, I talk to people, and even if they drift off for a couple of years, or they go away and work somewhere, they come back, and then when they come back, everybody is as welcoming as they were when they were there. And there's something, I think, as you say, about the fact that you're always there for each other. I think it's a really interesting, because you don't have events every week, because it just can't, it can't happen. And with the nature of travel and work and families and available venues, because venues aren't always easy to find, it's an irregular scene in as much as, you know, nights pop up. There are some really good regular nights, but it's just the constancy of the people, I think, that keeps it moving. And it allows everybody, I think, to just remain part of something without the pressure, because you can feel a lot of pressure to belong to things.
Yes, but we most of the people involved in Ireland, we've known each other a long, long time.
Yeah.
And we know each other's life situations and what's, you know, how to keep in touch, and the music is the great thing about it. It, although it has changed up and down through the years, it still creates that same want and feeling and appreciation amongst all of us, and that's a great thing. You know, there's very few other situations in life that I can say where that has happened as well, you know.
Yeah, no, Paul, I think you're right, and it's those 3-minute moments, isn't it, or those sections of your life, which is, you know, the records that you hear or the people you're talking to when you hear another one. That's the beauty of it. That's what connects the physicality of these objects that you've got boxes of behind you and that you've pulled 3 out. It's the putting it on, it's the taking care of it, it's the hoping that it's going to engage people, and it probably will, because I mean, clearly you would have enough records to keep a dance floor busy. I mean, it must be quite rare when you manage to detonate the dance floor.
Yeah, a lot of it's about knowing your audience too, I think. You know, like what I play in a regular nightclub, and I've done a fair bit of that down to the past 15 years anyway. Yeah. And what I play at a soul event to be very, very different. But it's all soul music. You know, that's what I do.
I think so. Maybe then. Sorry. No, go on.
But the soul crowd I'm part of have a very solid, committed interest in the music. There's nothing. This isn't about people walking in and out of the pub. This is hardcore friendship and following of a particular style of music.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, that's a good segue then into your third record. What have you chosen for the last one for this episode?
Right, and this one now, there's a lot of memories again attached to it. It's Nolan Porter, If I Could Only Be Sure.
Lovely.
And the reason I picked that one out is, you know, you think you reach highs and lows throughout the years in this whole scene, but this one would definitely hold a particular high for me because, you know, there was times people say, all the great stuff's been discovered, that's it. Yeah. You go, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe not. And then out of the blue, this appears in, I think it was 1996, 97 at the Cleethorpes Weekenders. And we were going, well, how did we miss that one? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it seems so obvious, doesn't it, really?
And it's not your typical banging Northern Soul tune. It's actually got more of a Bill Withers type of a feel, or Terry Kelly. It kind of fell into that more acoustic, softer soul side of things rather than your thumping brass and your screaming vocals. Do you know, it's a different type of record. but the interest and the love for that tune that was created instantly was astounding. I mean, people just instantly fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And even people who weren't involved in any way, shape, or form with the soul scene would run up to you and go, what in God's name is that? I have to find that. I have to get Can you tape it for me? You know,
yeah. So Cleethorpes was where you first heard it then?
I would say, yeah, and there was Kev Thomas at the time.
Yeah.
Another person who was instrumental on the soul scene in Ireland, particularly in the mid-90s, late 90s. He did up a load of 12 inches white label with was 5 tracks on it, and that was on it. And the amount of people that bought them just to get that tune off it was astounding. And they're scattered all over Ireland, these white label 12 inches.
They must be quite rare, I'm guessing, are they?
They're there, but they're just pressings that he did up to get people switched on to new stuff. And there was a real mixed bag in it. I think one was Tears by that house tune. The other was Dry as a Bone, Pressure, and the other was Terry Callier and Ordinary Joe, the very up-tempo brass version. What was the other one? City Joe Quayle's I Don't Do This.
Okay.
So, you're thinking you're growing tired of a certain style maybe, or what you're listening to lately, and next thing, bang, this comes in your path, and you're going, right, we're all back on side again with a new direction,
Yeah, I think it's the baseline for that song. For me, that's what I always kind of remember for it, or remember it when I hear it. That's the thing, because as soon as you said it, it starts playing in my head, and then I start kind of remembering the last time I heard it. It's not an unusual record, is it? I mean, a lot of people would have it, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing extraordinarily rare or anything about it, but it's that reaction it created within people almost instantly. You know you're onto a winner with something like that. And it could be a £3 Motown record, it might be a $5,000 Northern Soul biggie. But it's just those, as I said earlier, that hook. As Bernie Gordy said, it's what's in the groove that counts, Does it do the job it's intended to do? Yeah. Because, what I always say to myself is all of these records went for cost price at one particular time. Yeah. It was the demand and the exclusivity of the DJ's possession of that record and everything that followed that drove the price up and up and up. Yeah. How many of them were pressed up? 5 copies. Well, now it's going to reach 5-6 figures, do you know? Yeah. And on goes the story. Yeah. But I'm sure Cheating Kind was £3.50 somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Off in America,
Yeah. No, it's unusual though, isn't it? Because it's this thing about demand, isn't it? And then, as you say, I mean, we all look at Discogs, and sometimes you look at it and you just think, there's no way. There's no way that you can pay that, or why would you pay that? Or I remember when that wasn't that price, or the last time I looked, it was. And so, I mean, Discogs is amazing. It's a beautiful resource because it's an archive of stuff, and you can dig. I don't like the search feature because it's very fussy. If you don't get it exactly right, it's not very forgiving. Throws you off. And then going backwards and forwards between pages is irritating. I find it amazing to trawl, but as I said, you look at some of the prices of things, and then you just think, well, even if I had the money for it, do I want that one that much, or why would I want that one? Or I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you find the kind of the buying of records. I mean, I'm assuming you still buy records.
Yeah. What I've noticed in everybody else that has been at it for some time now is, as you said, the price has just gone outstandingly ridiculous in areas like. And my biggest regret of the 35 years or so I've been into it is that I didn't get these tunes when they were affordable. You know what I mean? Yeah. As you say, you're looking at them and you're going, wow, 300 quid. And I remember when that was 5 or 3 quid,
That's the thing, isn't it? And then some areas are more expensive. I mean, gospel is really expensive, like the funky gospel stuff. I mean, it just seems to be, there's a real demand for that. Whereas if you want to buy, I've been looking at Verve stuff recently and sort of soul jazz and stuff, and Jimmy Smith is peanuts, and you can get so it's strange how these things are trends within it as well. I'm sure you see all of this anyway. I mean, and I don't know what you think about it, but it just sometimes you see a record and you think, how is that only that cheap? It shouldn't be that cheap. Surely it should be this much. Someone posted something on Facebook the other week, and it was a Lebanese funk album. and there was one track on it that they played. I went straight onto Discogs, and it was $2,000 for the album. And I was thinking, you'd be paying $2,000 for one track, which you might never play because you might not. You know, it's unusual. I mean, it's
it's hard to see how price can relate to the actual song.
Yeah.
This is, I think, where a lot of people get thrown off. You know, I like it. How much? £700. Oh, come on. You know.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, I got one the last day. Sly and the Family Stone. I ain't got nobody, and I said that's up there with Al Wilson. Help me. Same vibe. I mean, I do the exact same job with a crowd on a dance floor. But yet that record's only about £5. The Sly and the Family Stone one. So it doesn't always. I don't know. Do I have the word? It doesn't always represent the quality of the tune, the price. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think that.
Sorry.
No. Keep going.
You can't go. It's you can and you can't. You can vary. You can base your quality of tunes or how you rate a record on its rarity and its availability and its price. But then you'll turn around and hear a Motown record for £4 or £5 and go, "That's such a brilliant tune."
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting as well because, I mean, one of the things that we've always cherished, and I'm sure you're the same, is the fact of original vinyl. So if I don't have £7,000 for a record, I'm not going to buy a £10 reissue and play that because then I may as well just play a CD. So I think that there is, even though the price can be an issue, there is something to be said for the authenticity of something and hearing that out. I mean, I'm sure you would have thoughts on original vinyl and that kind of experience.
Well, what I found even more interesting was the people outside of the soul scene that collect records.
Right.
And they're every bit as finical and interested in finding authentic original pressings. Yeah. And even Record Store Day, if they're doing a new digitally remastered Rolling Stones record, they won't go near it. They said, no, we're not even interested in that stuff. We want the authentic stuff. And that's something that comes with just record collecting in general, I think.
Yeah.
I think the Northern Soul scene is quite exclusive in its price range. It's just can be, for people even outside it, jaw-dropping. Do you know what I mean? You're just going, wow, like, when we hear about auctions and records that went for sale during the week, and it becomes news amongst us, you know.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, you know, I tell this story because it was a fascinating moment. We had Greg Belson come over and play at D8 a couple of years ago, and he had Willie Dale in his box, and he played it, and you just, you know, you're never going to hear that again live in its original form because there aren't many copies and all of these kind of things. So I just remember when it started, and there's that kind of, I think it's a guitar or something, isn't it, where it starts sort of playing, and everybody just went, and then thought, for those 3 minutes, that's it, you're not going to be able to dance to this again. I mean, you could dance to it on YouTube or something, but that really, for me, reinforced the kind of the sense of community, but the love that people have for these 3 minute bits of vinyl. It really was a fascinating moment for me. And I'm sure you've had moments where a record comes on and either you play it or you're dancing to it and you think, I might not dance to this again, or this is an unusual record, you know.
I think of stuff like that with maybe like Frank Beverly, Because of My Heart, or, you know, there are records, and as you say, when you hear them, you go, there's a good chance I mightn't hear this the rest of my lifetime, so get out on that floor and rock it, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are with this, that it's something very personal, but it's also, it's something which is very communal, and that movement between, you know, our hearts and other people's hearts, and how that all kind of brings us together for those short moments, even if you have a night which is every month, that's only one night and this kind of stuff. But there's something just so enduring about all of this, and this is why it's been really interesting to just kind of get your perspective on it, because obviously I know that you have been part of this scene for a long time, and I always say, and I'm genuine when I say I'm very new to the scene, and so it's a real privilege just to listen to people and to hear them tell their stories. So look, I'm thinking it's a really good idea for me to just close our episode by saying, Paul, listen, thanks ever so much for coming on the show, struggling with the records. I know that tomorrow it will be 3 different records, but it has been genuinely a real pleasure to chat with you. So thank you very much.